welcome back to my channel. My name is Darian and today I am going to be doing my November wrap-up. So in November I read 6 books, which is not the best, but I did have a pretty good reading month in terms of the quality of the books I read. I think I gave 3 books 5 stars, which that's 50% of the books I read. So that's pretty good. So overall I'm very happy with my reading month, and so let's just get into the books I read in November. So the first book that I read in November is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I saw this on Libby. I decided to give it a listen. I really did not know anything about it before I picked it up, and I ended up really liking it, which I was really surprised by. So this book follows these 2 people named Marianne and Connell, and they meet when they're in high school, I think, because Connell's mother works... Connell's mother works as a housekeeper, I think, at Marianne's house. So sometimes when he goes to pick his mom up, he sees her there and they talk and they kind of develop this friendship, but they go to the same school, but Marianne is kind of seen as this weird girl at school. She doesn't really have many friends, and Connell is definitely seen as more popular, so he doesn't really want to speak to her at school because he doesn't want his friends to think that he's hanging out with the weird girl. But they kind of develop this weird relationship, and they they start sleeping together and they keep their relationship a secret, and then Connell continues to ignore her at school. The book follows them through several years, so as the book progresses and as these 2 get older, they kind of come in and out of each other's lives, and Marianne kind of starts to become more popular within her circle of friends, and Connell kind of starts to become more of an outcast, so they kind of switch, and their relationship is definitely not the healthiest. I would say that they definitely lack in communication skills because they're both very clearly in love with each other. It's not just a sexual attraction between them, like they definitely have feelings for each other, but neither of them really want to tell each other that. And so it is very frustrating to read because if they just had a conversation about how they felt about each other, then everything would be solved. But this book, what I will say about this book is that it doesn't have much of a plot. It's definitely very character based, and I usually don't like books that are more character based. I usually need a plot in order to be interested. However, I ended up really being invested in these 2 characters. I really just wanted the best for them. I ended up caring about them a lot. It took me a while to start to like Connell because at first I thought he was very annoying. I really did not like how he would just ignore Marianne at school, but he was a pretty stupid teenage boy. Like, do we know any smart teenage boys? No. So I did end up really liking him, and I really liked Marianne. I will say though that in this book there are definitely trigger warnings for suicidal thoughts, sexual abuse, depression, and eating disorders, so definitely be wary of that before you pick this book up. But I ended up really loving this book. I have seen a lot of mixed reviews for this book, and I do understand, like, I can definitely see how this book wouldn't be for everyone, but I just thought that this book was really well written. I thought the characters, I just ended up loving them so much, and I really cared about what happened to them, and they both kind of dealt with a lot of mental health issues, and it just broke my heart to see them struggling. And so I ended up really liking this book. One thing I will say is that I did not expect so many sexy times in this book. I don't usually like to read sex scenes and stuff, so if that is something that makes you uncomfortable, I mean, after I finished the book, I watched the trailer for the show, and it definitely shows in the trailer that there's a lot of sexy times in this story, so maybe it was just me. But anyways, if you don't like reading about that stuff, then maybe stay away from this book. But I find I got used to it and I didn't mind it as much. But yeah, I at the very beginning I was like, oh, that's what's happening in this book. So I ended up really liking this book way more than I thought I would, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I really loved it, and it was probably one of the biggest surprises that I read this year. So I would highly recommend if you don't think the trigger warnings will bother you or anything like that. The next book I read, I am very excited to talk about because I actually read this for the secret TBR that I've been working on since July. I have mentioned it in many videos, and I finally finished it this month, so now I can actually talk about the books that I read for that video. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is The Diviners by Libba Bray. I finally read this. I've been hearing people people rave about this book since I joined BookTube, since even before I joined BookTube, basically for years. And I finally read it and I absolutely loved this book. It was so good. I don't even have words to describe how much I love this book. It was so good. So if you don't know, this book is about this girl named Evie, and she has this strange ability where if she touches objects that belong to people, she is able to see people's memories that have to do with that object. And so she often, when she gets drunk, she kind of uses this as like a party trick at parties, obviously. And this ends up getting her in a lot of trouble at the beginning of the book. So her parents sent her away to live with her uncle in New York. And her uncle works at this museum that is not doing too well. And also, I can't remember if her uncle is a detective or like if he used to be a detective. But there's these murders that start happening in New York, and his uncle is asked to help her uncle is asked to help investigate in these murders. I can't remember why, if he is a detective or if they just ask him. But anyways, so then Evie kind of comes along with him, and she's using her power to kind of help out with the investigation and stuff like that. So it follows Evie, but there's also a lot of side characters that we follow, and I love all of them. There is one character named Sam, who I feel like everyone loves Sam. I don't hate him, but he definitely wasn't my favorite. He kind of got on my nerves, but I have a feeling that in the other books in the series, I will start to like him more. My favorite character, though, is Jericho. I love him so much. He's such a gentle giant, and I just want to give him a hug, and yeah, I love him so much. So I really loved all the characters. I found with such a huge cast of characters in this book, Libba Bray did such a good job at developing all of them and not seeming like I would say, even though Evie is clearly the main character, all of the characters kind of seemed just as important in this book. Like there wasn't one character where when we were following them I was like, ugh, like I don't care about this one, I want to get back to that other one. Like I found that I was equally as interested in all of their stories, which I thought was very impressive. And yeah, I just loved the writing. I thought it was very descriptive and very atmospheric, and the villain in this book is very creepy, and I definitely got a little spooked. This would have been the perfect book for October, but you know, I read this not that long after October, so it's fine. But yeah, if you haven't picked this book up yet, I would really recommend it. I give it 5 stars and I really loved it, and I cannot wait to continue the series. I know a lot of people don't like the last book in this series, which is really disappointing, but I really love this first book, and I hear the second and third book are also amazing, so I can't wait to read those. So the next book I read, I think, is my favorite book of the month. It was so good. Okay, so that book is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This book was absolutely amazing. I loved it so much.
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. Yup.
I know I literally just said the same thing about the Diviners, but this book, I think I liked it even more than the Diviners. It was so good. I read this for the Winers Book Club. This was our book club pick for November. That's the month we were in, but yeah, and so I will leave our live show link down below if you guys want to see us discuss this book. And we had 2 special guests last month. We had 2 special guests. We had Bree from the Lock Booktician, and we had Lois from Lo Chan Reads, so definitely check that out if you missed it. But this book, it was so good. Okay, so let me try to explain what this book is about because I have a hard time. So this book, we're following our main girl, Bree. We love her, and at the very beginning of the book her mother passes away, and so Bree is obviously dealing with a lot of grief, and she is accepted into this early college program at this school. I can't remember what the school is called, but I don't think it matters. And so she goes there with her best friend, and on her first night there, she kind of witnesses this weird attack that goes on at this party, but she's the only person who can kind of see what's going on. So like, I've heard a lot of people compare the beginning of this book to The Mortal Instruments, like how that starts, and I guess I see the connection, but it's purely just because she sees something that no one else can see. Like, that's the only similarity. But anyways, so yeah, so then she finds out about this secret society that is present at the school called the Legendborn, and it's kind of like, it is inspired by the King Arthur story, the Knights of the Round Table story. And so the Legendborn are descendants of like King Arthur and Lancelot and all those other people, all those other Knights of the Round Table, you know. And so Bree ends up meeting Nick, and he is, oh my god, I almost did a spoiler. I just fully almost had a spoiler. Yeah, she meets Nick, and Nick has kind of left the Legendborn, but Bree feels like that the secret society has something to do with her mother's death, so she kind of gets Nick to help her, what's the word? Infiltrate this secret society. There's also these things called Shadowborn. I think it's Shadowborn, right? And they are like coming through these gates into the human world, and so it is the job of the Legendborn to stop them. And there's also a character named Selwyn Kane, who I hated him at the beginning of this book, but I loved him by the end, and I also loved Nick, and I love Bree, obviously. But yeah, this is another book. I really loved all the characters. I thought all the characters were so well developed, and I definitely found the world confusing at times. You probably could tell that by me trying to explain what this book is about, but even though I was confused, I still was like, I just wanted to learn more. Oh my god, I thought the world was just so interesting, and I really, really loved the discussion of mental health and of dealing with grief. If grief is a trigger warning for you, I would definitely be careful before going into this book, because it is explored a lot, but I thought it was explored so well, and I really loved the discussion of grief and how it affects mental health in this book. And also Bree goes to therapy, and I really love to see that, because I feel like therapy is something that should be more present in fantasy novels, especially YA fantasies, because we have these characters going through like unimaginable things, and then they're like, yeah, it's fine, but they shouldn't be fine. And I think therapy should be normalized in YA fantasies. Well, every book really, but especially in YA fantasy. So I was really happy to see that in this book, and I loved it so much. I read the second half of this book in a few hours, which I kind of had to do because I had to finish it before the live show, but also I was happy to do that because I was just so invested. There was just so much going on at the end of this book, and I didn't know where it was going, and there's so many twists and turns that this book takes, and there's things that are revealed at the end that I did not see coming, and it was just so good. I highly, highly recommend this book. It's one of my favorite books of the year. Spoiler alert for my favorite books of the year video. But I just really love this book, and I cannot wait for the sequel. And I'm really sad I didn't tab this book. I don't know why I didn't, but I can't wait to reread this and tab it, because I definitely needed to do that. And yeah, I cannot wait for the second book to come out. I can't remember if I mentioned that I gave Legendborn 5 stars, but the next book that I'm going to talk about I also gave 5 stars, and that is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This was the other book I read for my secret TBR video, and I can't remember if I said, but the theme of that video was that my favorite booktubers chose what I read, and if you want to see how that worked, then definitely check out that video. But The Hate You Give, I have been meaning to read this for a very, very long time. I know it's one of the most popular books on BookTube, and it's been a long time coming before I read this, but I'm definitely glad I did, because this is one of the best books I've ever read. The writing in this book is just, it's so good. Like, it's so good. And I know everyone hypes this book up so much, but it is so well deserved. Like, I know there's so many books on BookTube that everyone hypes up and then you read them and you're like, it was fine, I guess. But this book, like, I'm telling you, it deserves all the hype it gets. It's so amazing. If you don't know what this book is about, we follow our main character, Star. I think she's 16 years old, and she's a young black woman, and one night she is in the car with one of her friends who is also black, and they get pulled over, and her friend ends up getting shot by the police officer, and he ends up dying, and he did nothing wrong. So this is a book about racial injustice, about police brutality, and I think those things are very relevant in our world today. I mean, they've been relevant for a long time, but I think especially this year with the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, it is incredibly relevant today. And so I think this is a really, really important book to read. I will say, especially to any black readers, this can be incredibly triggering. I mean, there's obvious trigger warnings for gun violence, for police brutality, for racism, for sexism, for just so many things. It could be triggering to anyone, but I think especially to black readers, you should check the trigger warnings before you read this book, because I can definitely see how this could be really triggering to someone. But I think especially to white readers, I think everyone needs to read this book, because it's just so well written, and I said this in my video where I read this book, that I feel like a lot of people, especially white people, read this book and they think that, you know, that's enough activism for one day and they don't need to read any more books by Black authors, and that is definitely not true. I know this book is incredibly popular and a lot of people have already read this, so if you have read this book, please don't let this be the only book you read by Black authors, because I feel like that's what happens a lot. So I just wanted to say that. But if you have not read this book yet, I really encourage you to do so. I thought it was just so amazing. I loved Star as a character. I thought she was such a complex character because I found myself, especially at the beginning of the book, I found myself getting annoyed with her, but then I had to kind of check myself and be like, okay, how would I react if I witnessed one of my best friends getting murdered? And also, this was the second time she witnessed one of her friends getting murdered. So yeah, I thought Star was a really interesting character, and I really loved her family, and I loved that we saw, you know, we had very hard to read parts in this book with Star dealing with the aftermath of witnessing her best friend being murdered, of her dealing with the trial of the police officer who shot him, but I also loved that we saw so many happy moments with her too. I know a lot of people, especially this year, people have been talking about how we need to read books like this and we need to read nonfiction books about anti-racism, but it's also important to read books about Black joy and seeing Black people be happy and not just them fighting for their rights, which that is very important, but it's also important to see them being happy. And I loved that Angie Thomas weaved those two things together, because we have so many moments with Star and her family where they're just experiencing joy, and I really love to see that. I loved her family. I really loved her dad. He was so great. I just really loved this book, and I listened to the audiobook for this, and I would highly recommend listening to the audiobook if you're able to, because the narrator for this audiobook was so amazing. She did such a great performance, and all her voices she did for all the characters were just amazing, and I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook, but I would really like to read this physically again one day because I do really want to tab this book. So all that to say, I highly recommend this book. It was so amazing, and if you haven't read it yet, I really encourage you to do so. The next book I read, it's been a long time coming. I've been wanting to read this book since it came out in July, I think, and I finally read it this month, and that is Loveless by Alice Oseman. As you can see, I did tab this book. All the purple tabs are moments I related to, so I don't know how well you can see, but there's a lot. So this book follows our main character Georgia, and Georgia is going to university, and she's kind of going through a lot because she's realizing that she's never had a crush on anyone, she's never been in a relationship, she hasn't had her first kiss yet, and she is a bit confused because she is obsessed with love. She loves the idea of love. She loves watching romantic comedies and reading fan fiction of couples and stuff like that. So she doesn't understand why she's never had a crush on anyone, and this worries her a lot, and she feels like she is loveless. And so she kind of starts to discover the terms asexuality and aromantic because she never really heard them before, and she is learning that they might apply to her and that maybe she identifies that way, and her kind of coming to terms with that. And this book if you saw I can't remember which vlog I read this in, but one of my Taylor Swift Playlistathon vlogs where I read this book, I talked about how almost uncomfortable I felt reading this because I related a lot to a lot of the thoughts that Georgia had, and I thought I was gonna read this and be like, oh my god, yes, I feel so understood, oh my god, this is such a great feeling, because I've seen so many other ace people read this and describe this book that way, but for me, I just felt so uncomfortable. I mean, it was great to see a character have similar thoughts that I've had, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe I'm not ready to read a book like this yet. Maybe I'll read this again one day and I'll like it more, but I was reading it and I just felt uncomfortable. And I can't really even explain why, so maybe that says something about me, but I was reading it and it was just so weird to see things I've thought, like a character in a book think the things that I've thought, I have read books with ace characters in them, but I've never read a book that actually explored asexuality like this one did. So, I mean, I would say it's incredibly accurate. I mean, every ace person is different, so I can't say that this applies to every single ace person out there, but if you aren't asexual, I would highly recommend this book if you want to learn more about what it's like to be asexual and aromantic, because I thought this was a great representation of it. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I'm talking about it as if I gave it like 2 stars. I really did love this book. Like, I wasn't just sitting there hating it the whole time. I feel like that's what I'm making it sound like. It's just, I think there was just something that was keeping me back from giving it 5 stars, just because of how weird it was to read something that reminded me so much of myself. So yeah, I did prefer Radio Silence to this book. Maybe it's just because I related way too much to this book, maybe. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I am really glad I read it. I did love it. I gave it 4.5 stars. That's a great rating. I just feel I think I was expecting to give this 5 stars. I thought this was going to be a new favorite book of all time, and it wasn't. Although I did really love it, I did think it was really well written. I mean, this is an Own Voices story, so I thought the ace rep was great and the ace arrow rep was great. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about this book. I just feel uncomfortable. And I think that's all I'm going to say about it. So yes. And the final book that I read in November, this is kind of ending it on a anticlimactic note, but I finally finished reading The Hobbit. I started this book at the beginning of October, I think, and then I finished it on the last day of November. I had to read this for school. The only reason I tabbed it was because I needed to remember stuff for school. Oh, this is by J.R.R. Tolkien. I don't think I said that, but I feel like everyone knows this book, but if you don't, this book is about a hobbit, obviously named Bilbo Baggins. He's Frodo's uncle. I almost said husband. He's not his husband, he is his uncle. That would be weird. Yeah, Bilbo Baggins, he's a hobbit. He's just your regular old Joe. I don't know what I'm saying. He's just a regular guy living in his hobbit hole. You know, he's a very simple hobbit. He likes to eat breakfast. Oh my god, okay. All of a sudden my brain is like, we're not working anymore. Yeah, he's a very simple guy. He leads a very simple life, and then all of a sudden the wizard Gandalf comes to his door and with like 12 dwarves, and he's like, hey, or is there 13 dwarves? I don't remember. And he's like, hey, we want you to go on an adventure with these guys. You have to go to the Misty Mountains where the dragon Smaug lives, because he has this gold that was stolen from this dwarf's family. Something like that. And so at first Bilbo's like, I'm not doing that. But then he does. I think Gandalf kind of bullies him into doing it, so that's a whole other story. But I thought this was fine. This was actually my second time reading this. I read this for the first time when I was like 14 or something, and it was fine. Like, I don't completely love the writing style in this. I am interested to read the Lord of the Rings books because I love the movies so much. I do not like the movies for The Hobbit. I don't know why they made 3 3-hour-long movies of this tiny book, but anyways, so I thought this was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I kind of trudged through it, and now it's done, and that's all I have to say. So those are the books that I read in November. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. So let me know, what was your favorite book that you read in November? I would love to know. So before I forget, I did want to mention a few weeks ago I did reach 500 subscribers, which I cannot believe. Thank you guys so much. I still can't believe it. Now I'm almost at 550, which is crazy, but whenever I reach another 100 subscribers, I like to shout out some other smaller booktubers just to kind of pay it forward. So I'm going to talk about 3 booktubers that I think you should all check out. So the first one obviously is Mare from Mare Reads. I did talk about her a lot in my booktube gratitude tag, but Mare, I mean, she is starting to grow really fast, which I'm really happy about because she definitely deserves it. She has such creative videos, and you guys probably already know who she is because she is the creator of the DC, what is it? I don't know why I can never get this name right. The Disney Channel Readathon. The Disney Channel Games Readathon. I think that's what it's called. But yeah, she is the creator of that readathon, and it's such an interesting concept and such an original idea. And I mean, all her videos are so original, and so if you guys, I mean, I like to think that my videos are original in a way. So if you guys like my content, I think you will really love Mare's, because we also have a very similar taste in the books we read. So I think if you think you have similar taste to me, then you will really like Mare and her channel. The next booktuber I want to mention is Sarah from Sarah the Dreamer, which first of all, I love her channel name, and also I'm pretty sure we live in the same city. I think she mentioned in one of her videos the city she lives in, and I think it's the same as the one I live in. I promise I'm not creepy, I swear she mentioned it, but I know for sure we both live in Quebec, so that's great. But Sarah, her videos are just, first of all, she has the greatest accent because she is actually francophone, unlike me. So if you watch her channel and she mentions Andy LaRue, she says it the same way I do. I mean, she says it even better than I do because she is actually francophone and I am not. I'm more anglophone than francophone, so there's one thing. But also I find her videos, I just love watching them and they make me feel really happy, and I love her reading vlogs. They're so aesthetic and pleasing to watch, and I think she also has very similar taste in books to me, so that's another reason why you should check her out. And finally, I think you guys should check out Michelle from Bookishly Michelle. Michelle is so underrated. I don't understand why more people aren't subscribed to her, so definitely go check her out. I really love listening to her thoughts on books. Like, I love watching her wrap-ups because I find she describes books so eloquently, and I love the way she talks about her thoughts on a book because as you guys just watched, I am not very good at putting my thoughts together and talking about what I thought about a book. Evidence is Loveless, but she is very eloquent and she talks, I could listen to her talk about books all day long. I really love it, and she also has a very cute accent, so yeah, I definitely recommend you guys go check her out. So yeah, that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Bye!